Hi, I'm Father Joel, and welcome to Pilgrim Priest. I'm grateful for all of our mission partners and supporters, but I'm especially grateful to those of you that tune in and patiently wait for these episodes to drop each week. Thank you for listening, and God bless you.
We have one more year to repent. Praise the Lord. Our first reading today comes from the book of Exodus. And I've just discovered that Exodus has 40 chapters. I wish I'd known that earlier. It'd be great to read a chapter a day for the Lenten season, wouldn't it? Still encourage you to get out the book of Exodus. It's the story of Moses. We all know the story of Moses. It's even been made into different movies and animated cartoons, but it's worth reviewing briefly. Remember that the Israelites, the descendants of Abraham, are now living in Egypt. And at first they lived there well, but after a while as they grew, the Egyptians felt threatened by the Hebrews. They were concerned that they might join their enemies and if Egypt was attacked. And so they begin to persecute them, they begin to enslave them. It's not uncommon for a minority to at first be welcomed, but then when the minority begins to grow, it becomes a threat to the majority's power. They start to experience persecution in various ways. And this is exactly what happens to the Hebrews. It gets so bad that Pharaoh says, throw all the baby boys in the river. Because men are warriors in the ancient world, and so that will keep the people from becoming too powerful. Now, Moses' mom doesn't want to lose him, and so she puts him in a little basket and floats him in the river. It's a mini Noah's Ark. He's saved from drowning, precisely actually by winning the favor of the Pharaoh's daughter, who finds him an adorable little boy and adopts him as her own and raises him in the court of the Pharaoh. When he's older, he sees the oppression that's happening. He sees a Hebrew being beaten by an Egyptian, and he looks around and he doesn't see anyone around, so he kills the Egyptian and buries his body in the sand. The next day he sees two Hebrews fighting, and he's like, why are you guys fighting with each other? And one of them says, are you going to kill me like you killed the Egyptian? And Moses thinks, uh-oh, I might be wanted for murder here. And so he flees into the desert. And here we see the sort of two classic responses that we have to threatening situations. The first is to try to dominate and control the situation. And then the second one is to run and hide. So first Moses tries to dominate and control. He sees the injustice, which is a good thing, but then he tries to take matters into his own hands. He tries to fix the problem himself by dominating and controlling, literally by murdering someone. And then, of course, whenever we try to dominate and control, it's never enough. And so he feels out of control, the threat of himself being accused of murder, and so then he runs and hides. He runs into the desert. Most great biblical figures spend some time in the desert, except for poor Jonah, who spends time in a whale's belly, so you can decide which one's a better option. So he's out in the desert, he meets Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he ends up marrying Jethro's daughter and being a herdsman, taking care of Jethro's flocks. And so that puts him out in the desert where he sees a bush burning, but it's not consumed. And he's like, let me go over and check this thing out. What is this? And when he gets close, he hears a voice saying, take off your shoes, this is holy ground. This isn't a place for one to try to dominate and control. And I love that. In the ancient world, and even in Japanese society today, when you go indoors, you take your shoes off. Shoes are for outdoors. And that makes sense because anybody who's camped knows what happens with your tent, right? All this sand, somehow this sand like magically gets in your tent. So you leave your shoes outside. Well, they lived in tents, and so when they go indoors, they take their shoes off. It's similar today to how men take their hats off when they come indoors or when they're in the presence of a lady or when they pray, right? It's a sign of respect. Now, women do not have to remove their hats in church. And the reason is because for women, hats are decoration. For men, hats are armor. Hats are part of the spiritual, emotional armor that we need to face the world. And so we need to be reminded that you don't need your armor around your lady, that you should allow yourself to be vulnerable in her presence. And the same when you're eating dinner at the table, or when you're praying to God. Like, take off your armor, you don't need it. So that's the idea, is that he's vulnerable before the Lord. And you notice he responds by trying to cover his face. So first he tries to dominate and control. What's up with this fire? I want to know about it. Then he tries to run and hide. Same move, right? And God says, I have seen the affliction of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries, and I know well what they are suffering. Therefore, I have come down to lead them out of the hands of the Egyptians and into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. Now, for over 400 years, the Hebrews have suffered persecution at the hands of the Egyptians, and they might rightfully think God isn't listening. And yet God responds and says, I have heard, I have seen, I know well what they are suffering, and I have come down to lead them out of slavery and into freedom, into the promised land. Now, God's going to do this work, but he's calling Moses to be his instrument, to be his visible sign on earth, his prophet, and to speak God's words to both Pharaoh and to the people. Moses is very aware of his inadequacy, and he immediately starts with the excuses as to why he's not the right choice and why God should pick someone else. He first says, well, what's your name? Like, I can't just show up and tell everyone, hey, I saw a burning bush, and the burning bush told me. Rightfully so, right? So he asks God, who do I say sent me? And God says, I am who am. I am sent you to them. Now God's naming this deep reality about himself, that everything that is was created by God. And so children in faith formation will ask me, well, if God made everything, who made God? And the answer is no one made God. God always is. He simply is. We owe our existence to God. We are contingent beings. We depend for existence on God. In fact, you can tell that God is thinking about you, and this is how you can tell. If God stopped thinking about you, you would stop existing. So if you're existing right now, God is thinking about you because he holds everything in existence. None of us owe our existence to ourselves. But God is a completely different kind of being. He's not just another being in the world. He's not just another God. Even the biggest God, he is completely other than the world. He is. And we are by participation. And so God reveals this reality of his own existence. Moses continues to make excuses. He'll say, I'm not a good speaker. And God will say, well, your brother Aaron can do the talking for you. And so Moses is perhaps imagining himself standing in front of the court of Pharaoh with his staff in his hand and his brother at his side and saying, hey, you're the most powerful, superpower leader in the world right now, but I'm here to tell you to let my people go. Moses has perhaps seen firsthand what the Pharaoh and the power of Egypt do to people that oppose it. And he knows that he is inadequate for this job. He knows that he is inadequate. But in this story and in the rest of the book of Exodus, we discover another response to feeling inadequate, to feeling threatened, besides trying to dominate and control or running and hiding. And this third response is to allow God to lead him. The virtue of being open to God's leading in the Bible is referred to as meekness. It doesn't translate well into English because we think of meek and mild, but we should think of meek meek and ridiculously brave, because when you do what God asks, you do crazy stuff that wouldn't make sense if you were relying on your own power. And that becomes the secret to Moses' life. Moses is incredibly successful, not because he relies on his own smarts, on his own strength, on his own ability, but because Moses learns to rely on God. And God is able to do great things through him. Now, believe it or not, this is very relevant for our everyday life. I don't know any moms who don't feel at some point inadequate. Like, I'm failing as a mom. I'm ruining my kids. I know a lot of guys who don't feel inadequate, and they don't feel inadequate precisely because guys are good at not feeling. It's not because they've just buried it, right? And then it comes out in weird ways. It can come out in being angry all the time. Guys who feel inadequate can turn their anger towards other people. It can come out in investing lots of time, effort, and energy in the one place where a guy feels adequate, like fishing or watching sports. Playing sports I get okay, and I know watching sports is fun, but there are guys who make a career out of armchair quarterbacking. Well, why? Well, obvious. Because if I can point out the flaws of those other people, then I can feel adequate, right? And so there's all kinds of ways that guys try really hard to not feel inadequate. And you know what? It works until you come home and your wife makes you feel inadequate, and then you got to make her feel inadequate, and that's a match made in hell, right? But when we look around us, we can see all over the place that those attempts to dominate and control or to run and hide. It may be harder to see it in ourselves because it seems like such a natural response. Sometimes it's a little easier to see it in your spouse or your kids or your boss or your coworkers, other people in your life where it's like, oh, the going gets tough, the tough disappear. Or the going gets tough, it's time for overwhelming firepower. I told you, right? We can see that response, dominating and controlling or running and hiding. Well, brothers and sisters, we feel inadequate because we are inadequate. That's why we feel that way. The feeling is accurate. The world is too big for us. The tasks that God has called us to are too big for us. But just like Moses, we're not going in it alone. Moses doesn't have to take notes and get it all right and have the burning bush tell me exactly what to say again, right? Because he's leaving and he's going to come back later trying to accomplish what God asked. No, God is going to be walking with him. And throughout Exodus, we can see God guiding Moses. In a similar way, God intends to walk with us in our everyday life. And so, while the world is too big for you, it's not too big for you and God. And so the secret to responding to those feelings of inadequacy is not to dominate and control. It's not to run and hide. It's rather to allow God to lead me. To allow God to lead me. Our Christian faith is great. It's got lots of wonderful teachings. It's got lots of wonderful guidance. And it's good. I mean, it's good to follow those teachings and guidance, but the faith doesn't start to really work until you give the keys to God, until you let Jesus be the Lord of your life. When you allow him to be the Lord, you can let yourself off the hook from needing to dominate and control. You can realize that there's no way you can run and hide, and you can turn your problems over to God. They become his problems, and all you need to do is let him lead you. This is what we're invited to for our Lenten season. We're invited to the same attitude as Moses. We're invited to stand in front of the burning bush and realize that it's burning with God's love for us. That whatever you're going through, God sees you. God hears you. God knows well what you're suffering, and he has come to lead you out of slavery and into freedom. And we need to take our shoes off, and we need to say, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening. Not my will, but yours be done. I never realized my dad was stealing board games from the toy store, but looking back, though, all the clues added up. You can't trust Yahtzee. It's such a dicey game. I can't wait to give my childhood toys to my nieces and nephews. It's a great way to pass on my legacy.